Today's presentation is the history, science, and politics of UFOs. History, we're going to go back in time and we're going to say, well, there were cave paintings back 30,000 years ago in France that showed what looked like extraterrestrials as well as flying saucers. I went over to France and I saw some of those paintings on the walls that are 30,000 years old. So I think history-wise, ETs and flying saucers or UFOs or whatever you want to call them have been here for a long time. So that's part of the history I'm going to discuss today. Science. We're going to learn how these ETs have come here from a long ways away, as well as how we can fly to other planetary systems and have already done that. But you're going to learn the science, and it's not with chemical rockets. And then politics. Our government has kept a lot of secrets from us. Some people say, oh, they can't keep a secret. Oh, yes, they can. There's a lot of top secret facilities in this world that you couldn't even get near. And so they have a lot of technology that they've back-engineered from flying saucers, and that's we're going to talk about the politics. Historical names. First of all, I looked up in a number of dictionaries, what is the UFO definition? I like this one the best. A mysterious object seen in the sky for which there's no orthodox scientific explanation can be found. Back in approximately 590 BC, Ezekiel, in the book of the Bible, he said this, as I looked, a stormy wind came out of the north, and a great cloud with brightness around it, and fire flashing forth continually, and in the midst of the fire, it was gleaming metal, and from the midst of it came the likeness of 4 living creatures. I saw the glory of God. His voice was like the sound of rushing water, and the earth was lighted up by his glory. So to me, that's a bright metallic object in the sky that's shining and showing lightness on the ground. And so I call it the glory of God is really a UFO. So that's the first terminology. Then in 1944, in World War II, Air Force pilots on both sides, the German side, the Russian side, the American side, were seeing balls of fire or balls of light that were about 1 to 2 meters in diameter that looked really bright and fiery. In French, fire is F-E-U. I don't know if that's why they were called Foo Fighters, I'm not sure. But that's what they called them. And each side thought the other side had some new technology that they didn't have. But it wasn't any of that. It was from elsewhere in the universe. These Foo Fighters kept following all our planes. So they were called Foo Fighters in that day. Then in 1947, a pilot, Kenneth Arnold, a private pilot, out near in Washington, near I think Mount Adams, he saw a disc in front of the mountain flying along, and he reported it, and it was written up in the newspapers in that time frame as a flying saucer. So that was the first time it was called a flying saucer. In 1953, our U.S. Air Force decided to call it unidentified flying objects. In Spanish, that's an ovni. Object, something flying, non-identified. I can't translate it exactly. In 2006, the UK decided to call them UAPs, unidentified aerial phenomena. And if you were listening to one of the nighttime shows about a year ago, Hillary Clinton was being interviewed, and the commentator was asking her about UFOs, and she said, that's the wrong term. They are called UAPs. So she was, we were all witness to the fact that she knew they were UAPs. So those are just some different terms for UFOs. Now I'm going to get into some ancient artwork depicting UFOs. This is a painting that is in this Orthodox Christian monastery in Kosovo. It takes almost the whole wall. It's a really big painting. And up in the heavens, or the sky, you can see these objects. Do you see the people in them? There they are. So there's a pilot in there, evidently maybe controlling it. And this guy's looking back at the other guy. So here's a round painting. It's in a round wooden frame. It's beautiful, and it's quite large again. But look in the sky. There's this little dot here. The Madonna was Saint Giovanni. I can't pronounce my Italian that well. It's in the Palazzo Vecchio in the town hall of Florence, Italy. So let's blow this up right here. Okay, here's a shepherd with his dog, and he's shielding his eyes, looking up at this object up here. And the object itself, whoever painted this, shows all these rays of light coming off of this object. Here's a light ray from heaven, which supposedly represents Mary's impregnation by the Holy Spirit. There's the flying object up in the UAP or UFO or flying saucer, and there's a beam of light coming down through a little window right here onto her head. And here's what it looks like in more detail. Even the birds are looking at it. Now, are angels really ETs? I propose that question to you. They both descend from the sky or heaven. In fact, many years ago, something like in the neighborhood of 2,000 years ago, most of the older books of the Bible had the word sky. It was only replaced later by the word heaven, as being some special place in the sky. So here are all these angels floating around. And in that day, people couldn't fly. They couldn't even go up in a balloon. They didn't know if anybody was up in the sky, they must have wings to be able to be up in the sky. So they drew them with wings, even though they might not have had wings. This is a more recent painting, circa 1300. So the actual presentation was which actually happened a lot earlier than 1300 and was handed down as stories. And so they drew wings on them because they must have wings. Are saints really ETs wearing space helmets? Well, that kind of looks like a helmet. And later on, Christians decided to make it a little halo over people's head, so it's changed throughout the years. How did intelligent life on Earth begin? These are three possibilities. There may be some others. Did we evolve from simple life forms? Maybe an amoeba in the middle of the ocean grew into a whale that eventually went out on land and became a mammal and started breathing air and eventually became us? Or were we created by some higher power? Maybe God or some extraterrestrial life from another planet helped create us. After all, Homo sapiens have only been around 200 to 250,000 years. That's not very long considering our planet is more than 4 billion years old. So, in fact, I have a book at home that shows another civilization that interacted with the dinosaurs way back 70 million years ago. and that was in Peru. So Homo sapiens have only been around a short time. Even bipeds that we find skeletons of, Neanderthals, they've only been here about 2 to 3 million years old. That's as far back as we've found any human or biped skulls. So we haven't been here very long. Did we migrate here from somewhere else in the galaxy or solar system? Some people have a theory that we came here from Mars, that Mars had a catastrophe happen, something in the neighborhood of 2 million years ago, and that maybe the story of Noah's Ark is really us coming from Mars, because they had a lot of lakes and a lot of rivers at that time. So it's just a theory, but it could be. Okay, I wanted to instill upon you how big our galaxy is. Our Milky Way galaxy is 100,000 light years in diameter. That means if light started out from a star here and it took 100,000 years to get to a star over here, it's traveling at the speed of light. So we're 100,000 light years in diameter. And that's just our galaxy. And there are billions of galaxies out there. On this diagram, here's our sun, the little star right here that has our planets going around it. Our galaxy has 400 billion stars with more than 2 trillion planets in this galaxy. All the stars you can see in a clear night are within 100 light years of Earth. So if this is our sun, we can only see the stars with our naked eye right in this area. With field glasses, you could see a little bit further. With telescopes, you eventually see further. So all those stars out on a clear night are within 100 light years of Earth. And those stars, the light from them started within 100 years, the past 100 years. But there are 100 billion galaxies in our universe. The numbers are what? Astronomical, right? So I'm going to play a little short video here. This is a galaxy which looks like ours, a spiral galaxy, but you're seeing it from the top, and I just want to show you what it looks like from the side. So mostly our galaxies are very flat like this. Now, I want to ask you a few questions here. And I would like to see a show of hands. And we have a camera in the back that's recording the back of your heads, and we want to get a count. Do you believe that other intelligent life exists in our galaxy? You know how big the galaxy is. Do you believe that there's other intelligent life in our galaxy? Raise your hands. High. Okay, great. This side of the room wins over here. Okay. And of course, if you believe that, then going a step further, do you believe that ETs from other planets have been visiting Earth? Again, over here. Okay. About the same number of people raise their hands, though. Do you believe our military is currently flying manned spaceships capable of traveling to Mars? A few less on that one. Okay. We got some real believers over here. Okay. Have you ever seen a UFO or had an ET experience? Oh, we got 4 or 5 people here that raise their hand. You might want to talk to me afterwards. I'd like to hear more about it. Okay, when I have taught classes on UFOs, I normally assign them a prerequisite. Before they can come to my class, they have to watch this movie, Roswell. This movie was produced in 1994, and it was shown on Showtime back then.
30th reunion of the Army's renowned 509. The drop-in J-bomb is not all the 509 was famous for. For more than 6 hours in July of 1947, the town of Roswell was known as the flying saucer capital of the world. Debris recovered from a crash site in the desert was originally identified by Army intelligence officer Major Jesse Marcel as seen from a flying saucer, much to the embarrassment of the Army, and in particular Major Marcel, shown here holding what turned out to be a piece of aluminum foil.
Could I talk to you a little bit later?
Yeah, you're going to be here at the barbecue, right?
No, I mean alone.
Let it go, Jesse.
Local rancher just brought in a whole lot of, I don't know what you'd call it. Some, top secret.
This thing was big. Let's just suppose Los Alamos or White Sands launched some ultra-experimental plane, rocket, whatever. Nobody's found anything because nobody's out looking. And that means this ain't ours.
Sorry. Hey, Bob, here comes Sheriff Wilcox. See if he can get us in. Open the gate.
No, sir.
What do you mean, no? I'm the sheriff of this here county. I'll go where I damn well please.
We have our orders.
Whose orders?
Colonel Blanchard, sir.
What kind of a goddamn idiot? Release this nonsense. No disrespect intended, sir, but if you guys know something that we don't, you should have told us.
We have some reporters coming. We'll show them the debris that the rancher found. You will keep your mouth shut, and I will field all questions. What's this? This is what you found?
No. Sir, this is a weather balloon.
No, this is Warrant Officer Irving Newton, weather officer at Fort Worth. Tell us, what's your opinion?
It's a weather balloon. Quite frankly, I'm a bit surprised that someone with Major Marcel's experience didn't recognize it for what it was.
According to General Ramey, Major Marcel should have realized that what the rancher had found was, in fact, nothing but a weather balloon.
So if I'm the fall guy on this, I want to know what I'm the fall guy for. And I'll be a good soldier. Let me see your report, Sherman.
I don't know what you're talking about.
If it's a weather balloon, tell me how come Brazel's ranch was all cordoned off when we got there? And if it was a weather balloon, how could Marcel not recognize it when the damn things are sent up by the 509 twice a day from that rooftop across the street?
I'm a private goddamn citizen, you understand me? I'll tell you something else. I'm gonna write my congressman. You bet your sweet ass I'm gonna write my congressman. Where's it say anything in the Bill of Rights about kidnapping private citizens off the street, huh? Why don't you show me that amendment? Show me that page number, man. I know what I saw. I held it in my goddamn hands. They said the material was a weather balloon. Well, how in the hell does a weather balloon affect our national security?
Off the record, what's the truth?
I'll tell you the truth. You know, sometimes folks, they talk about little green men. Well, they ain't green.
Come on, Lewis. Jesse, I can't tell you anything more. The Army's worked very hard to bury this.
And I saw the bodies, too. Bodies. 5 or 6 of them.
That was a monkey with all of its hair singed off, his head swollen up like a melon from decompression. No eyes. They were popped out, leaving nothing but these black holes.
You saw the bodies. You think they were monkeys?
He was alive?
It was alive. What happened here is merely the tip of the iceberg. You see, physicists now speculate that it's unlikely these things fly vast distances from other solar systems. You see, there may not be just one universe.
Like, then what did I see out there in that field?
Oh, that. Why, that was a weather balloon.
This is a DVD of this movie that you just saw. I encourage you to find a copy of it, maybe on Amazon. and see the full 90-minute video. What was the 509th Bomber Group at Roswell Army Airfield noted for? Say it louder. Nobody? They were the ones that dropped the atomic bombs on Japan during World War II. And why were the UFOs or flying saucers so interested in them? We think because they were the only bomber group that had nuclear bombs. Who told the mortician about seeing the bodies? Janet, right. Now, Janet was really scared, and she had a right to be because she didn't exist for too long after this. A week after she saw the bodies, she was transferred to another Army air base in England. And then 2 weeks after that, she was told she had a special project in France, and a Army pilot and her flew this plane to France, but they never got there. And they never recovered the plane or her body. How many men were on the top secret commission set up to investigate the crash? There were 12. Who thought the true crash story should be made public? Secretary Forrestal, right. James Forrestal. What happened to James Forrestal at the hospital? Supposedly he jumped from his hospital room window. In the movie, they didn't portray it quite accurately because it looked like he was only 3 stories down, but he actually fell from a window that was on the 12th story. And it was not his room. It was across the 12th floor on the other side of the hospital from his room. So why would he be over there, and why would he fall from that window? Also, you notice that they talked about a diary. What happened to the diary? It was never found. Well, he didn't just have a diary, which is a little book. He did have little books, but they grew into big books because he had a diary of the whole World War II. And they were in many file cabinets at his house. And within days after his alleged jump out of the window, the Army came and confiscated all those file cabinets from his wife. And she wrote to President Truman, and after Truman was out of office for quite a while, he finally answered his wife, and he said, yes, the Army, the government does have all your husband's diaries. They are considered top secret, and they probably will be for 100 years. So there's something big there covered up. Majestic 12. These are the 12 members sitting around the table that were discussing what to do about this crash. This one I know quite a bit about, Dr. Donald Menzel. At the time, he was the professor of astronomy at Harvard, but he has an interesting tie to St. Paul, Minnesota. Some of you have been around for a while. You know there was a predecessor to Remington Rand Univac. Does anybody know what the name of that company was? It's called Engineering Research Associates. I don't know if any of you remember that, but they were the code breakers during World War II in Virginia. And after World War II, the government wanted to keep them together. They had amassed a lot of technical knowledge about the beginnings of computers. So they gave them a glider factory. It was no longer being used to make gliders. It's at Pryor and Minnehaha in St. Paul. They sold the glider factory to them for $1. And these 50 people came and formed this company, Engineering Research Associates. Dr. Donald Menzel was their advisor, their government advisor. It was learned later that he got paid more than the CEO got paid. The CEO is Bill Norris. You may have heard of him, Control Data fame. So he was very important to whatever was being developed by Engineering Research Associates. They developed the first vacuum tube computers, the first scientific vacuum tube computers in the world. And every one of their computers was shipped to the National Security Agency in Maryland. And here's Menzel, who's the professor of astronomy for his cover job, advising them on what to build. Very interesting. I'm going to show you some UFO photographs. Everybody asked me when I said I was going to appear here, are you going to show us some photographs? Well, here's a couple, but here's interesting. This is one of our helicopters, and who knows what this craft is. Is it extraterrestrial or is it one of ours? Here's a different flying saucer in Mexico in 94, 93, in Australia. You know, you often see pictures of UFOs, but they're spots in the sky. I just picked some of the ones that were structured craft to show you. Here's one, a fellow, I was at a UFO convention in Laughlin, Nevada, and directing the video crew, and a guy came up afterwards and he said, I just took a picture yesterday of a flying saucer above my house in Laughlin, Nevada. Would you like a copy? And he gave me a copy of it, and I blew it up over here a little bit so you could see a little more detail. So that was in February of 2010. Here's a really spectacular looking one at night, Nashville, Tennessee. Several shots of it. Here's one in Mexico. They call it a plasma ship. This is a guard railing on a highway. And the fellow was sitting in his car here, and he saw this craft rise from the valley below and go up into the sky. And he was a journalist, and he had a camera along and took several pictures of it. These are pictures that were taken by a famous UFO researcher in Switzerland. His name is Billy Meyer. In 1976, he took these. And in 1982, he took these again, up closer, right in his parking lot of his farm. One landed. Now I'm going to play a little video of Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin at one of the anniversaries of landing a man on the moon. And they're trying to tell you something in this little interview. Remember, they were sworn to top secrecy, so they couldn't tell you the real story. But listen to what they have to say. You know they have more to tell you, but they can't. So this lasts about 3 or 4 minutes here.
This nation should commit itself to achieving the goal before this decade is out of landing a man on the moon and returning him safely to the earth.
That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
From Washington, Crossfire. On the left, Mike Kinsley. On the right, John Sununu. Tonight, The Next Frontier. In the crossfire, Apollo 11 astronaut Buzz Aldrin and former NASA historian Alex Rowland.
It's a lengthy trip to Mars and back.
You bet it is.
And the next trip after that is even longer. Doesn't the next stop after Mars get so long that at that point it becomes impractical to send people on ships?
Never. In a year, my science fiction story will begin to tell you just how you can get to stars and how those guys may have come here a long time ago.
Ladies and gentlemen, Neil Armstrong, the first to plant his foot on the surface of the moon, has been a pioneer in many ways. And Mr. Armstrong, in asking you to come to the podium, may I say that millions of Americans have admired you not only for your achievement, but for the quiet dignity with which you have conducted yourself and represented not only our country, but humankind. Ladies and gentlemen, Neil Armstrong.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President, Mr. President, members of Congress, fellow astronauts, ladies and gentlemen. During the space age, we have increased the knowledge of our universe 1,000-fold. Today we have with us a group of students among America's best. To you, we say, we have only completed a beginning. We leave you much that is undone. There are great ideas undiscovered, breakthroughs available to those who can remove one of truth's protective layers. There are places to go beyond belief. Those challenges are yours. In many fields, not the least of which is space, because there lies human destiny.
Doesn't the next stop after Mars get so long that at that point it becomes impractical to send people on ships? Notice how he said that. He looked straight in the eyes and he said, never. In a year, my science fiction story will begin to tell you just how you can get to the stars and how those guys may have come here a long time ago. I was privileged to talk to Buzz Aldrin at one of the conventions I was at, and I was standing in the lunch line with him, so I got to talk to him for a little bit. I said, how come you and all the astronauts that went to the moon never wrote a book about it? None of you ever wrote books about it. He said, oh, but I have. I said, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't know about it. He said, yes, I wrote a book about it. It's sort of a science fiction book, and it's a science fiction story that he's talking about here. But he said something interesting to me. He said, there's a lot of truth to that book, especially the part that isn't in it. What are you trying to tell me? So I had to get the book and find out. I can talk to you more about it at break time if you want to know more about it. There are great ideas undiscovered, breakthroughs available to those who can remove one of truth's protective layers. Top secret projects? How can vast distance of space be traversed in a reasonable amount of time? The problem with chemical rockets is when they take off from Earth, there's only about a 10% of the weight of the rocket that is payload. The 90% is fuel. So it takes a tremendous amount of fuel. I call this ancient Chinese technology, chemical rockets. Now, there is another kind of a rocket that uses fusion, which is much more efficient. And 90% of the weight of this rocket can be the payload. These rockets aren't widely known in the scientific literature, but we have a video from an 18-year-old, he was 18-year-old at the time, that he made one of these rockets for a science project. He had a lot of help, though. He had a lot of the moon astronauts helping him make this rocket. And when it got time to test fire it, they said, no, you're not going to fire it in his hometown in Ohio. They had to take it to White Sands. And so they took it out to White Sands and had it sitting there on the pad. And he pushed the button to fire the rocket. Have you ever seen a bullet come out of a gun? No. Well, you didn't see that rocket either. All you heard was the thunder. The rocket went from 0 to 6,000 miles an hour in 1 second. It went, poof, and it tore the atmosphere, and then the atmosphere slapped back again, and that's the thunder that they heard. So that rocket does exist. They do have this technology. Gravity manipulation of space and time. This seems to be the way the ETs travel long distances. And we're going to watch a little 14-minute video about how to do that. Yes, I believe this is the way to go. Another possible way is just to teleport, like beam me up, Scotty. Okay? Some people think, well, that would never be possible, because how could you tear all your atoms apart and put them back together again? Well, you're thinking wrong. You have to think outside the box. You have to say that space and time can be manipulated, and then this becomes possible. Here's Ben Rich. He was the director of Lockheed Skunkworks, one of the most top secret facilities in the United States for building top secret aircraft and spaceships. He was there from 1975 to 1991. Regarded as the father of stealth technology, Rich was responsible for leading the development of the F-117 here, the first production stealth aircraft. He made some interesting quotes in his later years after he retired. We now have the technology to take ET home. No, it won't take one's lifetime to do it. There's an error in the equations. We know what it is. We now have the capability to travel to the stars. First, you have to understand that we will not get there with chemical propulsion. Second, we have to devise a new propulsion technology. We already have the means to travel among the stars, but these technologies are locked up in black projects, and it would take an act of God to ever get them out to benefit humanity. Anything you can imagine, Steven Spielberg, we already know how to do it. Ben Rich admitted on his deathbed that UFO visitors are real, both ours and theirs. So, knowing that gravity is a big key to everything, suppose you didn't have gravity, you would just float out into space. So I did a little research here. This was about 10 years ago. I went to the Minneapolis Library and I started looking up gravity on different newspapers, New York Times, Herald Tribune, and so forth. And I found that prior to November of '55, there were many articles discussing that scientists were studying gravity. But after November of '55, at the New York Times Index, for instance, there wasn't a single article after that. Many articles before, though. This one says, Conquest of Gravity, Aim of Top Scientists. This one says, Spaceship marvel seen if gravity can be outwitted. Speeds of thousands of miles are likely without a jolt. New Air Dream, planes flying outside of gravity. Then that was in '55. This is in 1960. It is time for the truth to be brought out in open congressional hearings, said Admiral Roscoe Hillenkotter. Hillenkotter was the third director of the CIA. After the CIA was formed in '47, he was the third director of the CIA. And so at this time, he wanted to bring this out. Well, the government decided to do something about that, and they decided they were going to ask a group you've heard of before called the Brookings Institute if we should bring this out in the open. Hillenkotter said that behind the scenes, high-ranking Air Force officials are soberly concerned about UFOs. But through official secrecy and ridicule, many citizens are led to believe that unknown objects are nonsense. To hide the facts, the Air Force has silenced its personnel through the issuance of special regulations. Okay, the Brookings Institute. Mankind is warned to prepare for discovery of life in space. Brookings Institute report says Earth's civilizations might topple if faced by a race of superior beings. So when this article came out, and it's just a short article here, but the actual study was many, many pages, the government decided, yeah, we better not tell everybody about it. It won't work. Now I'm going to show you a short 14-minute video of a guy who worked at Area 51 for a short time, a few months, and he saw one of these flying saucers, these alien flying saucers actually fly. In fact, he was hired to back engineer the power and propulsion source. So he's going to tell you in 14 minutes here how you can travel to the stars, and it's through manipulation of space and time.
Hi, I'm Bob Lazar. During late 1988 and early 89, I worked on the propulsion systems of extraterrestrial vehicles for the United States government. The hardware and technology I was exposed to should be placed in the proper hands of the scientific community, and it is the right of every person on Earth to know that there is physical evidence which proves that there is life elsewhere and that at least one form of that life has been here. For the purpose of this video, I'm going to segregate the information contained here into two separate parts. The first part will deal with information with which I've had hands-on experience and personal instruction. In other words, not only did I read briefings and not only was I taught the theories of these technologies, but they were demonstrated for me and I know they are true and accurate. Some of the points covered in this first section will be how vast distances of space are traveled by virtue of an intense gravitational field, how this gravitational field is generated, what the power source is and how it functions, and general information about disks and the project at S4. At the beginning of this first section, I'm going to give you 3 short science lessons, and once you've learned them, you'll not only know more about interstellar travel than almost anyone else in the world, but you'll know the actual method another civilization is used to travel from another star system to the planet Earth. One of the most predominantly asked questions is, how is it possible to cross vast expanses of space without exceeding the speed of light? Or how can you travel in reasonable time and economy between points that are light years apart? Now keep in mind that the speed of light is 186,000 miles a second, which translates into roughly 669 million miles an hour. And a light year is a distance traveled in 1 year at the speed of light. It quickly becomes evident that this type of travel would require a level of technology that man has not yet achieved. The truth of the matter is that traveling these distances does require a level of technology that man has not yet achieved. But it has nothing to do with flying in a linear mode near the speed of light. We know that the shortest distance between 2 points is a straight line, so in our universe we've always assumed that the fastest way from point A to B was to travel in a straight line at the speed of light. Well, the fact is that when you're dealing with space-time and you enjoy the capability of generating an intense gravitational field, the fastest way from point A to B is to distort or warp or bend the space-time between point A and B, bringing point A and B closer together. The more intense the gravitational field, the greater the distortion of space-time and the shorter the distance between points A and B. We know that gravity bends or distorts space-time and light by virtue of the fact that we're able to see stars which we know should be blocked from our view by the sun. Referring to the graphic here, the solid line denotes the position of a star that's located behind the sun, and the dotted line shows its position as viewed from Earth. This is made possible because the sun's gravitational field distorts the space, time, and light around the sun, allowing us to view stars which should be hidden from view. We know that gravity distorts time by virtue of the fact that if we take two identical atomic clocks and keep one at sea level and take the other one up to a high altitude, when we bring them both back together, they reflect different times. The difference in this passage of time is caused by the fact that a gravitational field weakens the further you get from the source. So the atomic clock which was taken to the high altitude was exposed to a less powerful gravitational field than the clock which we kept at sea level. In this manner, we can travel great distances with little linear movement, and this is how space-time distortion translates into reduced distance. Now back to our original question, how is it possible to cross the vast expanses of space required for interstellar travel without exceeding the speed of light? This is accomplished by generating an intense gravitational field, distorting space-time and allowing you to cross many light years of space in little or no time and without traveling in a linear mode near the speed of light. The next question is, how do you generate a gravitational field? Up until this point in time, I've used the term generate to describe the capability of producing a gravitational field, but since I'm not aware of any way of creating a gravitational field from nothing, a more accurate term might be to access and amplify a gravitational field. And this is what I mean when I use the term generate. To understand how gravity is generated or accessed and amplified, you must first know what gravity is. Well, gravity is a wave, and there are two specific different types of gravity, gravity A and gravity B. Gravity A works on a smaller micro scale, while gravity B works on a larger macro scale. We are familiar with gravity B. It is the big gravity wave that holds the Earth as well as the rest of the planets in orbit around the Sun and holds the Moon as well as man-made satellites in orbit around the Earth. We are not familiar with gravity A. It is the small gravity wave which is the major contributory force that holds together the mass that makes up all protons and neutrons. Gravity A is what is currently being labeled as the strong nuclear force in mainstream physics, and gravity A is the wave that you need to access and amplify to enable you to cause space-time distortion for interstellar travel. To keep them straight, just remember that gravity A works on an atomic scale, and gravity B is the big gravity wave that works on a stellar or planetary level. However, don't mistake the size of these waves for their strength, because gravity A is a much stronger force than gravity B. This amplified gravity A wave is so powerful that the only naturally occurring source of gravity that could cause space-time to distort this much would be a black hole. This brings us back to our original question, how do you generate a gravitational field? You must have access to an element which is heavy enough for the gravity A wave to extend past the perimeter of the atom. Then you can access and amplify it for space-time distortion. There are elements with higher atomic numbers which are stable, even though they don't occur naturally on Earth, and we can synthesize them in particle accelerators. These are the elements in the 114, 115 range which don't appear on a periodic chart. Beyond element 115, the elements become unstable again, and in fact, element 116 decays in fractions of a second. This finally brings us to the power source. The power source is a reactor which uses this element 115 as its fuel. In this reactor, element 115 is used as a target and is bombarded with protons in a small particle accelerator. When a proton plugs into the nucleus of an atom of 115, it increases its atomic number and becomes an atom of element 116, which, remember, decays instantly. What element 116 releases as it decays, or what it radiates, is antimatter. What is antimatter? Antimatter is the exact counterpart of matter, which has a charge and a spin that is in the opposite of all matter. When combined with any matter in our universe, antimatter reacts and completely converts to energy. So back to our power source. Inside the reactor, element 115 is bombarded with a proton, which plugs into the nucleus of the 115 atom and becomes element 116, which immediately decays and releases or radiates small amounts of antimatter. The antimatter is released in a vacuum into a tuned tube which keeps it from reacting with the matter that surrounds it. It is then directed towards a gaseous matter target at the end of the tube. The matter and antimatter collide and annihilate, totally converting to energy. The heat from this reaction is converted into electrical energy in a near 100% efficient thermoelectric generator. This is a device that converts heat directly into electrical energy. All of these actions and reactions inside of the reactor are orchestrated perfectly like a tiny little ballet. And in this manner, the reactor provides an enormous amount of power. So back to our original question. What is the power source that provides the power required for this type of travel? The power source is a reactor which uses element 115 as a fuel and uses a total annihilation reaction to provide the heat which it converts to energy, making it a compact, lightweight, efficient onboard power source. I've got a couple of quick comments about element 115 for those of you who are interested. By virtue of the way it's used in the reactor, it depletes very slowly, and only 223 grams of 115, which is just under half a pound, can be utilized for a period of 20 to 30 years. Now it's time to link all we've learned in our science lessons to the vehicle that utilizes all of this technology. And a few years ago, I never thought I'd hear myself say this, but that vehicle is a disc, which is generally referred to as a flying saucer. I had at least partial views of the 9 different discs out at Area S4, but the one I'm going to describe to you now is the one in which I not only saw 2 of the 3 interior levels, but I also saw it fully functional in flight. This particular disc appeared to be in excellent condition, and because of its sleek appearance, I nicknamed it the Sport Model. The Sport Model is about 16 feet tall and 40 feet in diameter. The exterior skin of the disc is metal, which is the color of unpolished stainless steel. The Sport Model sits on its belly when it's not energized. As you can see, the hatch is located on the upper half of the disc with just the bottom portion of the door wrapping around the center lip of the disc. The interior level of the disc is divided into 3 levels. The lower level is where the 3 gravity amplifiers and amplifier guides are located. These are the things used to amplify and focus the gravity A wave that we learned about in our science lessons. The reactor is located directly above the 3 gravity amplifiers on the center level and is in fact centered between them. The center level of this disc also houses the control consoles and seats, both of which were too small and too low to the floor to be functional for adult human beings. I was never given access to the upper level of the disc, so I can't enlighten you as to what the porthole-like areas are, other than I can assure you that they're not portholes. Now, before I go any further about the disc, I'm going to show you where and under what circumstances I saw it tested. My job in this program was to be part of a back engineering team. Back engineering is the act of taking a finished product and tearing it apart to find out what makes it tick. The goal in this program was to see if the technology of the disc could be duplicated with Earth materials. When I went to work, I was flown from McCarran Airport in Las Vegas to Area 51, which is a highly secure government base on the Nevada test site. Area 51 is located about 125 miles north of Las Vegas near the Groom Mountains and the Groom Dry Lake bed. From Area 51, I was bused to an even more highly secure facility located about 15 miles south of Area 51 called S4. S4 is situated at the base of the Papoose Mountains by the Papoose Dry Lake bed. The S4 installation is built into the mountain and the 9 hangar doors are angled at about 60 degrees. These doors are covered with a sand-textured coating to blend in with the side of the mountain and the desert floor. The hangar that housed the Sport Model was like a typical airplane hangar with the exception of the angled doors that I mentioned before. The hangar was equipped with typical tools and extensive electronic equipment. It also had a machine with an X-ray emblem on it and an overhead crane rated at 20,000 pounds. It was outside of this hangar that I saw the Sport Model tested. Now, when the disk travels near another source of gravity, such as a planet or moon, it doesn't use the same mode of travel that we learned about in our science lessons. When a disk is near another source of gravity, like Earth, the gravity A wave, which propagates outward from the disk, is phase shifted into the gravity B wave, which propagates outward from the Earth, and this creates lift. The gravity amplifiers of the disk can be focused independently, and they are pulsed and do not stay on continuously. As the intensity of the gravitational field around the disk increases, the distortion of space-time around the disk also increases. When the gravitational field around the disk is so intense that the space-time distortion around the disk achieves maximum distortion and is folded up into this heart-shaped form, the disk can't be seen from any vantage point, and for all practical purposes is invisible. All you could see would be the sky surrounding it. The program out at Area S4 consisted of 3 projects: Project Galileo, Project Sidekick, and Project Looking Glass. Project Galileo dealt with gravity propulsion and was the source of all the information you've learned in this first section. Project Sidekick dealt with a beam weapon that had a neutron source and was focused by a gravity lens. Project Looking Glass dealt with the physics of seeing back in time. Now, I was not personally involved with the hardware of Project Sidekick or Looking Glass, and those projects are beyond the scope of this video. Remember, not everyone who sees a disc in the sky is crazy, so keep your eye on the sky, especially here in central Nevada, and thanks for listening.
So gravity is the key, and our government has been involved in the study of gravity way back to 1955. And you have different organizations in the government and corporations that work on these projects. Bob Lazar talked about working at Area 51 and S4, Groom Lake. There's also another really top secret facility, even more top secret than S4, called Pine Gap, Australia, which is located near Alice Springs in the middle of Australia. Other labs like Los Alamos National Labs, Lawrence Radiation Laboratory, Sandia National Labs, JPL, NSA, NRO, there's many government organizations working on this. I worked for 6 months for Lawrence Radiation Labs, and I had to have a top secret Q clearance to work there on those projects. U.S. corporations performing secret space programs. Lockheed Skunkworks. The reason it's called Skunkworks is back in World War II, they were afraid that the Japanese might bomb this facility located on the coast of California. So they've covered it with camouflage netting. The trouble is the camouflage netting, whatever they used to make it with, it smelled like skunks. And so that's the name that stuck. It stuck to a lot, and that's the top secret facility that Lockheed has that develops all these advanced technologies. Raytheon, Grumman, Boeing, etc. Here's an F-117 stealth fighter. Now, many people know that it has lots of means of stealth. It has different angles here that reflect radar in different angles so that it's very low visibility in radar. But what most people don't know is it has the ability to create a gravitational field around the ship. When you do that, it's just like the sun. He said that you could see stars behind the sun. Well, if you have a gravitational field of sufficient strength around the ship, you will look towards the ship, but the space will be bent and you will see what's behind the ship. You will not see the ship itself. I have a friend that works at Tonopah, Nevada. He has seen these many times travel over that town. Everybody in the town has seen them either poof, go away. They could still hear the sound, but other ones, when they're coming into land, all of a sudden they'd hear the sound, but they wouldn't see anything, and then poof, there would be the plane. They'd turn off the gravitational field. So it really can be totally invisible. We've been talking about Groom Lake and Pine Gap here. I thought maybe you'd like to see this. These are shots that I took from Google Earth. And you can really zoom in a long ways on here. I tried to get the whole facility in this picture, but you can zoom in and see planes and everything sitting on the surface, all the cars and the parking lots and everything here. This facility, you can't zoom in. When you zoom in, it's all blotched out or grayed out. And it's just totally out of focus. And so they're really worried about you seeing what's going on here. This is the road that comes into this facility. There's a guard gate right here. And you can't see the detail, but the road becomes serpentine and all sorts of steel barriers and everything, so you can't just come crashing in here. And along this road, way farther to the right here, is this sign. No through road, Joint Defense Facility, Pine Gap, prohibited area. Turn around now. This sign is all the way around. There's many of these signs all the way around Groom Lake and all the surrounding mountains. Notice at the bottom it says use of deadly force authorized. They really don't want you to go in there. Here's the B-2 stealth bomber. Now this is an interesting plane. It's jet powered, but it actually uses gravity as an assist for thrust. The front edge of the wing is charged to something like 10 million volts compared to the rear part of the plane. And in that way, it creates a gravity distortion out in front of the ship, which is sort of like a surfboarder riding a wave. You get a free ride with this gravity distortion out in front of the ship. So the pilots that fly these say, well, they're all sworn top secret. Well, they say the best they can. They say, okay, we take off with conventional jets. We cruise up to something in the neighborhood of 100,000 feet. We turn on the magic and throttle the jets back. That's all they'll say. Now, maybe this is the magic. I don't know, but this was something above Edwards Air Force Base, a B-2 bomber, and obviously there's something happening here. I don't know if it's a gravitational field or not. The B-2 is interesting because it's only based at one Air Force base in the world. They only fly out of this Air Force base in Missouri because they have the capability of flying halfway around the world and back again without being refueled. They can be refueled if they need to, but they don't need to if they turn on the magic. So I blew up this little area right here, over on the right, and so you can see there's one sitting there on the tarmac. A couple of smaller jets, fighter jets here sitting here too. So they let you zoom in a long ways on some of these facilities, but not Pine Gap. Here's a couple ships. I threw in Bob Lazar's sport model here. Kind of sleek, like he said. But this is an interesting one. It's been seen all over the world since about 1990, called the TR-3B. If you know anything about Air Force nomenclature, T stands for tactical and R stands for reconnaissance. This ship, which is just an artist's conception here, is 600 feet on a side. It is large. 2 football fields long on a side. It has a, I don't know how to describe it, a magnetic, not a magnetic, a mercury magnetic circular flow inside of the ship that somehow disturbs gravity. I don't know how that functions, but what it does, it cancels out 89% of the weight of the ship and the occupants that are inside of it. So the ship only has to lift 11% of its own weight. And on the bottom side, there are 3 rocket engines, small rocket engines, and they create the lift needed to lift the ship up. This ship was used as an air traffic control center in the Iraq War. It was stationed at 100,000 feet, and they had a complete air traffic control center and facility in the middle, telling the pilots where to go and so forth. It can stay up for a week without refueling, just hovering. Now here's a really interesting looking one. It's questionable who made this. Is it ours or theirs? I can tell you that we have studied the technology of this, and perhaps we have made some similar ships, but I think this is probably alien technology. It was photographed in May of 2007 near Bakersfield, California. Normally it's invisible. You can't see it. But when radar beams hit it at the right angle and the right power, the invisibility is canceled out and you can see it. So it flickered into view for a few seconds as a radar beam went around, and a photographer saw that happening every minute, I think. It flickered in for a couple of seconds, and he was able to take a picture of it. Here's more interesting. On the wing sticking out here, and this is about 25 feet long, there's some nomenclature here. It says plus X base YX7 plus. Some UFO researchers decided they're going to do a little Google of that terminology. When they Googled it, they came up with Star-based JPL NASA Gov mission name Deep Space Program producer name Naval Research Lab. Well, that's interesting. They've given it, the researchers have given it the name Dragonfly Drone 2007. If you want to see many more pictures of this ship and all sorts of different ones that look similar to it, Google that. Dragonfly Drone 2007. You'll see a lot of different pictures. Well, they found out that JPL has a lab that's buried underground under a facility which is called the library. And underground, it's called the CARET lab. Commercial Applications Research for Extraterrestrial Technology. So maybe this was made there, or maybe it was, they're studying its applications for commercial use. We don't know. Reasons our government keeps UFOs and ETs secret. The Brookings Institution report, the secret installations, government organizations that are developing secret space hardware, U.S. corporations that are performing secret space programs. The secret space program black budget, which is large, that is not controlled by Congress. They don't have to worry about anybody approving it. And the government itself, the Air Force. What if we found out that, you know, the Air Force is not in control of the skies? They would be right. Well, they keep trying to determine what are the purpose of these ET visitations. And it isn't just one race. There are many races. To keep this a secret, it is alleged that people have been assassinated to prevent them from disclosing the truth about UFOs. The first one we know about, James Forrestal, was the guy that wanted to get this out into the open to the public. And he mysteriously died outside the hospital window 12 stories down on March 28, 1949. I will get a little bit further into this one. Marilyn Monroe supposedly assassinated herself or gave herself sleeping pills. The interesting thing is there were a lot of bottles of sleeping pills scattered around her bedroom, but when they did the autopsy, there were no pills in her stomach. So she did not die of an overdose. John Kennedy, we all know that he was assassinated. For what purpose? Could have been many purposes, one of which was UFOs. Dorothy Kilgallen, the star of What's My Line. How many people remember Dorothy Kilgallen? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah. And What's My Line? Well, she was the last person to interview Jack Ruby, who shot Oswald, yeah. And she said that he told her interesting things about why that all happened, why John Kennedy was assassinated, that had to do with UFOs. And Robert Kennedy, again, assassinated by Saran, but he's still in penitentiary in California, and all this time that he's been there since this date, he's been in solitary confinement and not allowed to talk to any reporters. Nobody can interview him. Must be something covered up there. Okay, so evidence of government assassinations. These are the people I just told you about. Thought the public had the right to know about UFOs. Marilyn Monroe threatened to divulge the information about UFOs which she had learned from the Kennedys. President John Kennedy died and planned to divulge UFO secrets. Dorothy Kilgallen stated she would publish secret information about UFOs in her New York Times column. She stated that on a Friday night, that she was going to start that column on Monday morning. She died Friday night. They found her with the same sleeping pill containers all over her bedroom, but no pills in her stomach. Just the same as Marilyn Monroe. Robert Kennedy threatened to divulge UFO secrets too. Now here's a little bit of information that's top secret. It's still top secret, even though it's out in the public domain now. There are people inside the government that would like to get this information out in the open, and every once in a while, they'll send a document or a film clip or something out to some UFO researcher and not say where it came from or anything. Well, this is one of these. Okay, the subject of this document is Marilyn Monroe. It's dated 3 August 62, 2 days before Marilyn Monroe died, or maybe assassinated. It's a wiretap of a telephone conversation between Dorothy Kilgallen and a close friend, Howard Rothenberg. Now, I'm going to blow up this section right here and read it to you. If you can't see it, I'll just read it to you. Rothenberg discussed this apparent, I can't read every word, of subject. Remember, subject is Marilyn Monroe. With Kilgallen and the breakup with the Kennedys, Rothenberg told Kilgallen that she was attending Hollywood parties hosted by the inner circle among Hollywood elites and was becoming the talk of the town. Again, we're talking about Marilyn Monroe. Rothenberg indicated in so many words that she, Marilyn Monroe, had secrets to tell. No doubt arising from her trysts with the president and attorney general. One such, I'm not sure, mentions the visit by the president at a secret air base for the purpose of inspecting things from outer space. Kilgallen replied that she knew what might be the source of this visit. In the mid-50s, Kilgallen learned of secret effort by US and UK governments to identify the origins of crashed spacecraft and dead bodies. From the British government official, she learned this. Kilgallen believes the story may have come from, I think it says the New Mexico crash in the late 40s. Kilgallen said that if the story is true, it would certainly be a terrible embarrassment to Jack and his plans to have NASA put men on the moon. Subject, Marilyn Monroe, repeatedly called the Attorney General and complained about the way she was being ignored by the president and his brother. Subject threatened to hold a press conference and would tell all. Subject made reference to the bases in Cuba and knew of the president's plan to kill Castro. Subject made reference to her diary of secrets and what the newspapers would do with such disclosures. Remember, this was a wiretap 2 days before Marilyn Monroe was found dead. Okay. Sometimes people ask me to see pictures of UFOs. Well, I also want to show some pictures of what some of these aliens look like. We don't have any photographs. I do have one I'll show you. But most of them are drawings of what people have described as that have been abducted aboard spaceships. And these are some of the drawings that that artists have made from what people have seen aboard the ships. Okay, this is the real one. This is not an extraterrestrial. This is an extra-dimensional. This is a guy who we photographed. He lives here on Earth, but in another dimension. He telepathically communicated with him and asked him if he would appear for us. He said it's very hard, it takes a long time. It took him 90 minutes on this couch to appear. Originally, it was just a little fuzzy ball of light. And that ball of light became more opaque. He started spouting the neck and the head. And anyway, he finally appeared after 90 minutes sitting on the couch. And other photographers had taken pictures of him, and other friends of his, many times now, thousands of times, they have pictures of him. So he lives in another dimension right on Earth here. Where do they come from? Majestic 12 members identified more than 50 races visiting Earth. They allegedly have a base on the back of the moon and maybe on Mars. Planets in other solar systems, Earth bases. There's a mountain in Puerto Rico that sometimes the mountain itself becomes transparent and they land in a base inside of the mountain and then it becomes opaque again. There's a deep underwater trench in Japan, which they've been seen flying in and out. It seems it doesn't make any difference whether they can fly in air or water. They can navigate just the same and as well in water. There's allegedly an Antarctica base under the ice that's accessed underwater. From the future on Earth, as well as other planets, from the future, they may be us in the future coming back to visit us to try to keep us from blowing ourselves off this planet. From other dimensions or parallel universes, like the guy I showed you. ET human hybrids amongst us, living amongst us, that look close enough to us that we wouldn't really recognize the difference. Now I want to give you a few references, and I do have handouts by the back door there. I have 20. There's a little bit more than that in the room, so if you have 2 or 3 people, you could take one handout. But all this information is available in the handouts. I belong to Minnesota MUFON. In fact, Tom and everybody back there belong to Minnesota MUFON. We have monthly meetings on the second Saturday of every month from 2 to 5 p.m. at the New Brighton Community Center. This is where we learn a lot about what I've told you today. We have had ET experiencers give presentations at these meetings, told us about their experiences, usually genetic examinations on board spaceships, guest speakers from Skype or in person, UFO videos from past national MUFON symposiums. MUFON, by the way, stands for Mutual UFO Network. It's an international organization that has state chapters, and we have our chapter, Minnesota MUFON. We also have member discussions after meetings at a local restaurant. That's where we tell all the good stories. Okay, we have a channel on YouTube. Presently, we started this a little over a year ago. We have 18 videos on. This was my last presentation in July of 2017 on contact with the Pleiadians. I talked for nearly 2 hours here today, but this was 2 hours and 42 minutes, so it was longer. Anyway, it's up over 37,000 views now in 8 months. Some other presentations. This is a very popular one too, 28,000 views there. And back in 2004, they actually had that picture of the extra-dimensional I showed you in the MUFON journal. Back then it was black and white. Now we've graduated to color. So this is a more recent version. For more information, MUFON.org or MinnesotaMUFON.org, or look at our YouTube channel. There is another YouTube channel that has been in existence almost since the beginning of YouTube that now has over 800 videos. I personally know the gal that's in charge of it, and she said she's made a lot of money at this. You know, you only get a fraction of a cent, a fraction of a cent for each view. It's supported by ads. Okay, she has over 800 videos, and every one of them has over 100,000 views, some of them 500,000 views. She said, I've never made so much money in all my life. So she really has a good record there. Roswell, the movie I showed you. Fire in the Sky is another excellent movie. That should be available on Amazon. It's a true documentary of an abduction. It happened in Arizona in 1975. The Day After Roswell is a book that Colonel Philip Corso wrote. He had an interesting job. He worked in the Pentagon in the late 40s, early 50s for the Alien Technology Release Department. Alien meaning in that case outside of the country of the US. But one day he got a shoebox of materials laid on his desk by his boss, and he said, see if you can get this released to industry. And he looked at it overnight and talked to his boss the next day and said, I don't think this stuff came from Earth, did it? And he said, you're right. One of the things in that box was fiber optic cable. Fiber optics is alien technology. And he talks about his releasing that to Dow Corning and funding the research and development to build a fiber optic machine to build fiber optic cables. And he talks about other things he released too. So some things have been released to technology, some alien technology have been released, but by far not all. Here's a conference I've gone to many times. You can reach it in a day. So a good day's drive to Eureka Springs, Arkansas. Now, I thought this was a good thing to wrap up with here. All belief is a cover-up for insecurity. So if you are insecure about some topic that you don't understand, you tend to say, I believe this, true, or whatever you think is what you think it is. I thought it was a good saying, and that kind of describes UFOs. If people don't believe in them, then they can decide what they want to believe in. And you don't have to believe the same as what they do. So that's all, folks. Thank you.